I'd like to get your take on the election since the last time we spoke. And I know that you had some very good efforts over there around Bowling Green and in your county. So that being the topic of your book. So I want to find out how that went. But let me just get up and running here.
Sure.
Okay. And I'm also live on TikTok on top of it all.
Oh, man, that's impressive. Yeah, you figured out this technology thing, huh?
Well, you have to, especially in these times when YouTube has taken down some of my videos because I discussed something that is now almost verboten, that being the election. And if you don't talk about it in a certain way, which is very troubling in our free society. All right, my guest is Jonathan Jakubowski. Jonathan is the director of SmartSolve. He's an award-winning startup business that is focused on sustainable packaging. Jonathan received his undergraduate degree from Bowling Green State, master's degree in public policy from Georgetown. He's an avid social entrepreneur, the author of Bellwether Blues, the founder of Champions in Action. Jonathan, thanks for joining me.
Charles, thanks for having me back on the show.
Okay, so as I mentioned, the last time we spoke was actually, I think, Election Day, ironically. And so you launched a very important effort to reach people directly on the county level, on the state level, person by person, eyeball to eyeball, directly, as a way to bring people into conservatism, into republicanism, and to make them at least question what they were doing and what they were about. So talk a bit, if you will, about that effort and how did that manifest and pay out in your neck of the woods?
Well, first of all, Charles, congratulations on your continued growth and the extension of your show on multiple platforms. That's really exciting. I loved our conversations throughout the election cycle and was elated when you invited me back on. So thanks again for that.
Thank you.
I had a dual attack. One, I wrote a book called Bellwether Blues, as you noted, and that was released in May. So I was hitting the circuit pretty heavy on radio shows and TV shows and programs, and had a lot of opportunities I don't usually have as a result of that. And then on the other side, I'm a county party chairman. I run the Wood County Republican Party. And one of our goals was to engage a door-to-door campaign. In the midst of COVID, when the Democrats weren't doing door-to-door, we really felt like it was necessary. So the most important point of contact is the face-to-face contact. Not only do you get tremendous data from that engagement, but you also are able to really persuade and understand what's on the mind of voters. So our volunteers throughout Wood County and throughout the state of Ohio from the broader coalition, the Ohio Republican Party, set out on what was record-breaking numbers of door-to-door contacts. So from both of those angles, I was able to get a pretty good feel for what Ohio looked like. And I can't speak for the rest of the nation, but I can say I was confident, as you recall, going into Election Day, that we were going to win big in Ohio, and that's exactly what happened. In my county, we won by 7.8 points. In Ohio, we won by 8 points.
Oh, yeah. Ohio was, to my way of thinking, which is obviously a bellwether state, traditionally a big state. And Trump did very well there. He did very well in several other big states like Florida and Texas and comparable states, which, of course, raises the question of what happened in some of these other states, particularly with the big machine apparatuses in certain major cities. I don't want to go too far into that because YouTube will pull the show down. It's just where we are right now in this country. We cannot discuss history. We can't discuss what might have happened actually in a political election, which is, I think, speaks volumes in terms of what's going on. Now, your efforts, though, did make a difference, I really believe. And I think that you reached younger people, you reached minorities, you reached the natural constituency of the conservative movement, which is younger people and minorities and blue-collar workers and, middle class, people who are kind of out in the real world, people who are not part of this elitist establishment. Now that the election is over and now that the midterm is just months away, are you continuing, Jonathan? Have you kept up your efforts? Are you trying to in any way replicate what you're doing, which has been a successful model in other states?
Well, I suppose before answering that question, let me kind of circle back just a little bit to explain what made our county's work so unique. In Bellwether Blues, I found out that my county, Wood County, Ohio, is one of 58 counties that voted twice for Bush, twice for Obama, and then once for Trump. And when you look back at the 2020 election, at the end of the day, 51 of those 58 counties voted again for Trump, and 7 voted for Biden. So I looked deeper into Wood County. What made Wood County once again go for Trump by the same margin that the state went by, pretty much? And to your point, the answer is it's quite a surprising coalition. It's younger folks. It's blue-collar workers that are aligned the perimeter of our county. It's a lot of individuals that fulfill the millennial stereotype that usually they think goes left. But in this case, in the heartland of America, they decided to vote for Trump, and we had a lot of success down the ticket as well. If you had an R next to your name in Wood County, Ohio, you won the race by tremendous margins. So that said, what I recognized from that election is there was a new coalition that had been delivered in Wood County in the 16 and 20 races that was new. It wasn't something that had happened before in 60 years. It was unprecedented from a contemporary political standpoint. And I heard from many of those people. I've heard from hundreds of them over the course of the months following the election, many of them feeling disillusioned, frustrated, feeling like they were voiceless, feeling like their voice didn't matter. And I heard many of them saying, hey, we need leaders to step into the gap. Right now is when we're most out of touch with what's going on, and we don't know if we can even vote anymore. Like what's going on? So I heard a lot of those concerns, and am seeking to address those through a new initiative that we're bringing about here in Wood County. It's only a pilot, and I don't know, Charles, if it's going to grow beyond that. We'll see. But we're trying to take the 1776 report, which was created by the president's 1776 commission,
yes,
and we're creating book clubs effectively throughout the county.
Oh, what a great idea.
And the goal is through those book clubs in 9 different sessions, we're going to take each of those clubs, and we're going to, if they have enough people that participate, we're going to take them and they're going to become a fully functioning Republican club with the emphasis on influencing your school board. We want to start at the grassroots level. That's where you can have the most influence, is a school board race in the curriculum that's affecting the minds of the next generation. I know that we can't control what's happening in Washington, D.C. and in the Beltway, but we certainly can do something in our backyards, and that's why we're starting there.
What a great idea. You know, that to go with the 1776 Commission report, which is really a solid pro-American examination of American history, is something that I think could cross ideological and party lines, especially now that we have this phenomena of implementing the race conscious theories which basically obliterate American history, which teach us to hate each other, like Governor DeSantis of Florida so aptly noted, and which create ethnic and racial division and dialectic, and which are anti-American. And I think that we now see, you know, I'm a big fan of TikTok, so I follow a lot of people there. I'm seeing a lot of liberals, a lot of, this one young gay woman with tattoos coming out saying she's now, because of this method of teaching, she's rejecting the left, and that it's just so heinous and so heavy-handed that they're overstepping themselves like they often do, and that this is an opportunity for a groups like the ones you're suggesting to step in and really teach American history, American culture, American way of life. And I think that that's a great idea. That's going to resonate with people. I'm really very pleased to know that you're doing that. And I hope you can maybe spread these book clubs. Book clubs are a great way to reach people. That's really good. Yeah,
we don't know, Charles, what's going to happen, but I know one of the co-chairs of the 1776 Commission, Larry Arnn, has learned about it. He's really excited about it, and Hillsdale's going to be watching this with a careful eye.
Good.
Obviously, the goal of the commission was to make sure that this could get to the grassroots, that everyday Americans would be able to read the report and understand it, because the principles contained therein, I'm afraid, aren't part of our civics education anymore. Those great ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those truths that are timeless, which means of our past, every nation has evils. America certainly has had its evils. Sin of slavery and the stain of racism certainly covers our past. But we're not exceptional because of that. We're exceptional because we fought a civil war to abolish it. We're exceptional because we became the most equal and free nation in the world, raising people out of poverty, sending millions, billions of dollars overseas to help alleviate the masses. We are a beacon of light and hope and freedom. And when we're at our best, we're focused on those principles. And that's what the report really talks about. Of course, it's been criticized by the left, but that's what is going to be naturally expected. And I think you're right, Charles. I think people of all political persuasions and stripes can read this because it's true American history and we can become inspired by it. The one thing that I thought that it was missing, however, and what we're adding into the clubs is the dimension of how you take that information and use it to persuade. And that's why I wrote Bellwether Blues, was to persuade others, to teach them how to have conversations with people who don't understand or aren't engaged in politics using story. And then finally, we close it by writing a little bit on local government and what our local government in Wood County is about, to kind of give a well-rounded, holistic look and feel to that education. And then if we're successful, and we'll find out if we're successful, then we're going to have these clubs become fully functioning Republican clubs to take that knowledge and turn that into political persuasion. Because this battle of critical race theory that DeSantis in Florida is pointing out and what we're talking about today, that is a political tool that's being used with political vehicles to usher it in. You have to have political power to prevent that and stop that. So that's what we're trying to create here in Wood County.
Excellent. And I have a copy of the 1776 report on my desktop, and I'm reading it very carefully. But where can people get that report?
I encourage you to go to Hillsdale. Just type in Hillsdale, Google or Bing or whatever. Type in Hillsdale 1776 report, and they'll have you give you their first and last name and email address, and the report pops right up. It's only 42 pages, I believe, in length, so it's not long at all. It's a quick read, and it's pretty inspirational. When you read some of the quotes, one of my favorites is a quote from Calvin Coolidge, where he says something to the effect of, if the rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness are inalienable, that means they always are. They can't be canceled. If equality, if all men are created equal, that can't be canceled. Like, there's nothing new or modern that can cancel things that are timeless and true. So a lot of beautiful quotes from some of our leaders throughout history, like Frederick Douglass and MLK and Calvin Coolidge. It's a report well worth reading.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of which, one of the great biographies in American history is Frederick Douglass's Up From Slavery. I highly recommend that. It's an incredible book.
So
and it shows the accomplishment of somebody who had started out in extremely bad condition. And it should be an inspiration to all of us. Now, Jonathan, I want to ask you about something that gets into a bit of a subversive subject. So I want to be very, very careful. We have to continue to investigate various irregularities, let's put it that way, that occurred in the last election. And there are several areas that are now emerging that display this. I'm not going to mention the specific areas. I'll just say the states of New Hampshire, Michigan. There's a big story just the other day, Georgia and Wisconsin. Now, there are stories that are there. They're in the paper. I'm not going to mention them because this is YouTube, but they do show that there was a pattern of irregularities. Now, these irregularities are going to have to be addressed if we are ever going to have another free election. And there's just no way around that, because if it's not, then they'll just continue to fester. What can you think we do to try to bring back our system of balance in our election?
Well, I think the people have the most power through their legislatures. That's why the balance of power was created in the way that was separation of powers. It's the legislature that most directly expresses the people's will. And one of the reasons Ohio and Florida were so successful at running an election is because we've had so much practice being swing states. We created laws. We had those laws tested in courts. We refined our checks and balances. We have sets of accountability. I'm on the Board of Elections. I was in the room the night of the election. I can see the system disconnected from the internet. By the way, we have multiple ways of ensuring that ballots are checked, that audits are created, and our Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, said it was the most successful election we've ever had. As you measure it, if you measure it by the amount of people that voted and the access to voting, the early voting. So all that we do in these states, Ohio and Florida specifically, is what needs to be replicated in other states, and that happens at the state legislative level. So we need people that are on your show in these states where there are concerns to go to your legislators and encourage them to bring about reforms to make sure that the integrity of the vote is something that the people can count on. And I've had many conversations, and thankfully in Ohio, we have a lot of confidence. There's a lot of reasons I can give as to why what we do is successful and effective, whether it's 2019 with the municipal year or 2020 like a presidential year. What we do is right on pace because of all of the work we've done to fix those things in the legislature.
I also think we need to encourage people to run for the legislature.
Hear, hear.
State rep, state senator, you can win. I mean, a lot of these races, you'll see that people are in there for decades. They've never been opposed. They've never had their voter record examined. And if you're a housewife or you're a teenager or you're retired or you're empty nester, you have some time, you can run for one of these offices and win because they're local offices. You can just make your way around your community, knock on some doors, speak plainly, say hello to people, and it doesn't take a lot of money. You don't have to be famous. I'm actually writing a pamphlet about this. It should be published in a few weeks. But the point I'm making is you can win. I mean, it really can be done. And if there's one thing we learned from this last election, it's the actual political power that state legislators have. Most people didn't know this, including most state legislators didn't know it. They have the power under Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution to make election laws and a lot of other things too. Welfare, health care, education, all these things. And they have forgotten that power. They have transferred that power to the federal government. And if you don't exercise power that you are entitled to exercise under the Constitution, then there is a vacuum that's going to be picked up by someone else. It's just how it works. So these state houses have to reassert their sovereign rights under the constitutions of their states and federal constitution to exercise power. And I think that we need to have a movement now to get people to run for these offices, to contact these people and tell them to do just that, because the fact of the matter is that under the guise of the emergency, which was the pandemic, you had states where governors and judges and even private bureaucracies stepped in and they started to tamper with election laws in a way that helped their particular agenda. That is not constitutional. It is the state legislature. And now there are cases where the state legislators are realizing this. There was just a case in Michigan where a state legislator sued the state Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, who had just gone in and tampered with absentee ballots. She said, oh, you don't have to verify the signatures. It just has to have a vague look like the signature. In other words, she weakened the standard. And that meant that any clerk could decide to pass through a vote when it may not have necessarily had the right signature. And that now has been deemed wrong and by a judge. It's too late, but the fact is that we need to see more of that. We need to see a reassertion of the sovereign rights of the citizen and their elected representatives. It's called democracy. The left used to be proud of democracy. Well, what about democracy? This is democracy to do that.
Yeah, it's a historical truth that when the legislature shrinks back, the executive and judicial branches are going to expand. And exactly. We had a lot of shrinking back in the year 2020. I think a lot of these legislatures have learned a hard lesson from that. And unfortunately, we the people have as well. So it's critical, it's imperative that we take upon ourselves the mantle of that authority. And Charles, you're absolutely right. Our state constitutions and our state legislatures have tremendous authority. The police power resides in the state. Look at many of the cases throughout Supreme Court history, and you'll see kind of a devolution of decision-making back to the states and the state legislatures with deference for states' rights. I'm not saying I agree with every one of those cases, but that's generally the tendency. And a lot of our state legislatures have no idea. And yes, you're absolutely right as well on this point. We need people to run that have convictions. We aren't going to decide this is how I'm going to vote on a given day on the basis of how the wind's blowing in this direction or what these people are saying. If you have conviction and principle, and that's what's driving you to be engaged and interested in politics, maybe that's a sign that you should step into the fight and become a part of the solution. And running for office should certainly be one of those reasons. And I'd say this too, it's one of the things that's most difficult for me as chairman is recruiting for offices like city council races. School board.
Oh, they're very important, especially school board.
They're critical.
Yeah.
very few people are willing to say yes because it's too much in life. They're too busy. They have too many other important things. And when you leave that space vacated, there's people with different ideologies that can be perverse and dangerous who get in without any opposition. So that's why we have to start local. We have to think local and consider how much authority we actually have at the local level. And when we do so, we can have make a tremendous difference to assert principles that I think will secure the next generation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, offices like school committee, man, that's critical, because the schools have been usurped by the National Education Association and the Department of Education. These things, they have no authority. The authority resides with the elected members of a local school board, because that's usually someone who has a child in the schools, who lives in the community, that you can talk to them. That's really where the power is. They have skin in the game. So yes, but take a look at the school board. Take a look, swing open the door of the school and find out what they're teaching in there, and actually have some say in it. So these are very interesting and exciting positions. It gives you a great sense of purpose. It's almost a civic duty to run for any of these offices. I mean, I ran for Congress, so I'm speaking from a little experience, and it's quite an exhilarating experience. I really urge people to get up and do it.
I think back to Alexis de Tocqueville, who wrote Democracy in America in 1831. And when he visited the shores of America, he was leaving behind him a nation, that of France, which was just caught in turmoil, revolution after revolution. I think 18 revolutions and thousands of innocent lives taken, and was trying to figure out what was the secret of the success of America. And he took a very transparent and, I think, full picture that Democrats and Republicans throughout modern history have really celebrated. And he acknowledged the wrongs, like slavery, that existed in America, while also acknowledging many of the incredible things that made America unique amongst other nations of the world who also had slaves. And what he said is what makes America most unique, in his opinion, was the local affinity that each citizen had for the place where he lived. The amount of time that American citizens would spend in their local committee rooms having conversations around legislation that would affect the way that they lived life. And they were jealous and they were passionate about defending their locale from external interests changing the way that they lived life. And he said that was unique because in France, everything was top down, central government. The guys in Paris are going to make the decisions for everyone else. Well, America was different. It was bottom up. It was driven from a state mentality. This is my state. This is my locality. This is my region. I want to work out of this position to protect the rights for all citizens, to ensure that they too can advance the timeless truths. And I think that he was quite prophetic in what he pointed out, that eventually becoming a civil war, that America would expand all the way from coast to coast. But the thing that most impressed him was the local emphasis, the local investment, and we need to get that back today.
Oh, absolutely. It's localism, it's subsidiarity. Every American president understood that. I think it started to change with Wilson. That's a historical issue. But the thing is that, there's a reassertion of local control and of, in a sense, the assumption of control of the politics that affect our lives and our destiny. So, Jonathan, let my listeners and viewers know where they can get your book, any websites you'd like to share, or anything else about you that you'd like to share.
Oh, thank you, Charles. I would encourage you to go to Hillsdale, type in that Hillsdale 1776 report, and you'll be able to read the document that Charles and I spoke about today. If you're interested in Bellwether Blues, you can find that on Amazon or wherever other books are sold. Also, you can check out our website at bellwetherbluesbook.com. And Bellwether is spelled Bellwether, a unique spelling of the word that goes back to the 15th century.
Interesting. All right, Jonathan Jakubowski, thank you so much for joining me, as always.
Thanks, Charles. I appreciate it. Have a great day. God bless you and your viewers.
Same with you, and talk to you soon.
Yes, looking forward.
All right, thanks a lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 25 minutes is enough. All right, let's see what else. What do we have in TikTok land? All these TikToks.
Not a mask in sight.
I block as many Trumplicans as I can. Somebody said to me, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe those people really need to hear what you have to say. And I disagree. You have to understand my perspective. I do these videos first and foremost for me, my First Amendment right. I want to take my ideas, my opinions, and my voice and throw it out in the ether and let the chips fall where they may. If along the way I get people that like me, agree with me, resonate with me, and decide to follow me, no one is going to be more appreciative of that than me. Hell, I just reached 44,000 followers. Who knew? But then we get the trolls coming in. They're talking shit.
So we now have irrefutable proof that Facebook. Swayed the election. Project Veritas did an undercover
Where they had one of their top employees saying, and very proudly, that they had registered up to 4 million people and that they achieved their mission because of the sheer scale and reach of their efforts. It's also true and irrefutable that the Facebook, that Zuckerberg personally spent something like $400 million pouring money into these various front groups that were involved with quote-unquote election integrity. There are now cases emerging in Georgia, in Michigan, and in New Hampshire, and in Wisconsin, which show that these so-called voter integrity groups were doing everything they could, just short of breaking the law and maybe crossing that.
So we now have irrefutable proof that Facebook swayed the election. Project Veritas did an undercover
Where they have one of their top employees